Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing good. How is the weather in Boston?
It's muggy and humid. Not as bad as Atlanta.
Okay.
Worse than Pittsburgh. So I just flew in today for the wedding, for Kate's sister's wedding. So yeah, I'm very excited.
Yes.
So that's why we have a different backdrop today.
Another one. It's like your
Yet
10th.
Another one.
Well, be sure to tell her that I said congratulations. I want to see all of the photos because, I love that stuff. Well, let's go ahead and chat with our guest. I forgot to ask her what time it is. Gosh, it's got to be late there.
6 hours
have, 6 or 5?
I think so.
Is it 6? We'll find out here in just a second. We have the second installment of our 4-part series with Elevate Brands. And today we are chatting with Lo Martin. Lo, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
We are thrilled to have you, dear. So what time is it in the south of France?
We are at 10 o'clock, which is, I've kind of kept my New York schedule for the most part. So, it doesn't feel so late. It's just the right time to have a nice conversation with friends. So
that sounds good to me. So are you drinking, say you're keeping your New York time, so are you still sipping on coffee, or how are you?
I'm a big believer in water. So I had my glass of wine earlier, I must say, because
I am too.
Cheers to the water. But yeah, wine is just wine. We call it pink water, the rosé, because it's just what you drink at dinner time here. So
yeah, France. I guess it depends what part of France. I was just there. I have a lot of family from La Rochelle. Actually, half of my entire background is from La Rochelle, and it's odd. I've never seen coffee been drinking out of bowls. I'm not sure if they do that in the south of France.
Oh yeah, because it's just easier to dip stuff into your coffee, like your croissant and your baguette. Yes. Oh yeah. The only thing, it's strange. Like as a New Yorker, like we go pretty strong with our coffee, and here it's a much more mild coffee, I guess, because you need to like fill a bowl with it, so maybe it can't be like espresso strength. I do miss a good New York coffee. It really wakes you up, which is aligned with our kind of city go mentality. But again, like this, coming here every summer visiting my parents is an exercise in changing pace, and so it's good. It's good to be here. It's a very, very beautiful part of the world. I'm sure Francois. And yeah, it lets me take a different kind of approach to work. As I was mentioning to you guys earlier, I have terrible internet here. So a lot of the stuff that I normally like to do, I delegate to team members, and I spend more time kind of on the strategy side and thinking through things and using less actual internet bandwidth. And so it's a funny, forced shift and a different kind of mode that I go into when I'm working from here.
That's awesome. I would love to kind of have that forced reprieve from it for a little while. I think it seems like a good time to me. But I'm curious, is your son going with you on these trips? Does he get to experience France each year? Because I'm jealous.
Oh yeah. Henry is a seasoned traveler. He started making these trips with me when he was 5 months old. And yeah, he loves coming here. It's funny. At the end of his school year this year, they were doing a poetry study, and one of the poems was this beautiful kind of prose poetry piece about all the little pieces of Provence that he loves and comes back to, and building his cabin, and like seeing the frogs, and it's all these like little moments that for a kid, it's so important, especially a kid that grows up in the city, to be able to get out of the city and notice these little things of the world, just these beautiful natural moments. So I feel really, really fortunate that I get to bring him here a couple times a year, and and that he also gets to unplug from city life. Still a bit of a struggle to get him off of Minecraft, even when we're here, but a little bit easier. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I'm sure he'll be really pumped when he gets to come back in a few years and say that he got to drink pink water way before his friends were allowed to.
I have a picture of Henry. I think it was his 2nd birthday. He's like holding a bottle of champagne. So yeah, I mean, it's in his blood. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, let's go on ahead and chat then about, because we could talk about France all day long, truly. We could spend the whole hour. But let's not. Let's talk about, what you had referenced before. You've got to spend some time delegating what you do at Elevate Brands. So what all do you do over there? And we know that you've just been busy as all get out after securing Series B. So congratulations again. But let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, what is it now? Over 115 employees. So we're doing a lot of different stuff across all of our departments. My team is marketing and creative. And as a whole, the company, we're an Amazon aggregator. For those who aren't familiar with that, essentially we, purchase brands that are native to Amazon and bring them into our portfolio, kind of give them our secret sauce and take them through our playbook and grow them in-house. So a really exciting exercise in, being able to identify brands that have a lot of growth potential, working with sellers and really understanding what their dreams are as entrepreneurs and being good stewards of their brand as we take it on. But then also real operating expertise in supply chain, in marketing, in creative, in brand management. So many moving parts and so many different incredibly talented people coming together to make this, giant enterprise work and thrive. So for me, it's so exciting to be, just a small piece of what we're building here. And, of course, responsible for our marketing and creative team, which is just my happy place. So.
That's fantastic. And let's talk, we definitely want to get into, brand building and everything Elevate Brands is doing. But before that, it sounds like you had a really interesting, really exciting time in like the entertainment industry, kind of like Cassandra Craven. I'm so eager to hear about both of your stories because she was interviewing like the Hollywood elite stars and stuff like that. And you were working at MTV, is that right?
Wow. MTV was so long ago. It's almost like at this point, not to like age myself, but it's definitely a blip in the past. I think the more significant kind of career moments for me were definitely one of the biggest ones was definitely my time with Now This, and eventually we merged to become Group 9, working with the newsroom there, building the creative team there. Was an extremely, just an amazing opportunity and a real moment for me in my career where I understood the power of data-driven design and how much you could do as a business when you empower your creative people to think as business people, to give them the tools and the data insights to understand what's working and what's not. And I think that's really how the team at Now This that I built was able to thrive and really have a huge impact on the business successes there. I'd say new media is a sweet spot for me, understanding how to tell a story through, on whichever channel you're choosing. And then also, I studied photography at NYU. That was my major. And when I came out of college, I really just wasn't interested in going to work for the man. It's kind of, maybe part of the rebel in me when I was in my early 20s. And, I was living in the East Village. There were all of these amazing little entrepreneurs all around me, many of whom were my friends. I'd picked up enough skills in college, thank you, NYU, to know how to build a website, how to, design a logo, how to do all the kind of basics of brand building. And I started rebranding companies straight out of college. And so it's so funny that it all came full circle. And here I am again, like taking in a brand, looking at what needs fixing, what needs the layer of paint. And it's been a 20-year exercise, truly. It's of course changed over time. We have so many more channels to use and so much more data at our hands to make better decisions. But for me, the exercise has always been telling stories, aligning with the tribe that you feel like your brand most aligns with, and, really clarity of information. And yeah, so I think that's been the common thread through it all.
Yeah. And that's really what branding is all about, right? Is telling a story. You've got to be able to communicate what you do, how you got there, and how we use the term buyer persona. What's the other word we keep hearing, Francois?
Customer avatar,
and how your customer avatar plays the role in that story. So, that's very cool to hear about your background, Francois. Sorry, I saw that you had a question.
Yeah, I know that I've talked to a few businesses that have maybe they started out on Amazon treating it as more of a cash flow business. Eventually they realized, well, holy shit, I have something good here, something that I could actually build, something that's worth something. And there's so much new money in the space. I think a lot of them may be shifting towards, we're not just a cash flow, we can sell a lot of products. We have a lot of great reviews. Now we need to focus on building that brand. For those business owners, I guess, is there any advice that you can give them to where maybe they didn't have that unique story? Maybe they didn't have that eco-friendly marketing ploy that they wanted to start at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question with endless answers, right? So indeed, I think even in this short amount of time, the Amazon space is, changing very quickly. And what was working perhaps a year ago on Amazon, just optimizing your brand on Amazon in some niches, in some categories, is not enough today. So to your point, like thinking beyond just kind of optimizing for Amazon and thinking about your brand and the story you need to tell is becoming more and more critical. And so much so that Amazon is very clearly developing product within their platform and releasing updates that reflect that thinking, right? That reflect the brand building exercises around, products that are being sold on Amazon. So if you haven't yet done that exercise, it's of course not too late, especially with, for example, your review mode. When I talk about an Amazon product detail page and the reviews that your customers are leaving behind, for me, the analogy is really like that those are the paintings on the cave wall. That's the history of your people. The comments that they're making, why they love your product or why they've been disappointed by your product is so much of the brand building exercise that for a brand starting from zero, they don't even have the luxury of that information. They have to go do consumer research and surveys. Well, on Amazon, if you've been there for a bit and if you've grown your brand, you have a lot of that information at your fingertips. So are such an advantage already that you can dig deep into those reviews and start to understand what the dynamics of your existing customer are, and then build story around that. Try to align yourself with what feels like the kind of main worldview of that group of people and start building your story around that. I think the advice would be to dig into the information you already have, the human information, beyond just what you're selling and how much, is whatever touch point you have that you can better understand who the humans are, dig in there and try to pull out quantitative pieces of that. I love to use Airtable to organize even things like reviews, like pulling out keywords and bucketing different reviews into different sets to understand, okay, these are the keywords that popped up the most within this set of reviews. So I'm starting to shape, okay, I understand now that's a critical piece to the worldview of my consumer. So really doing that due diligence on your product detail page, I think will get you really far. And then you'll start to understand, okay, well, if these are the things that matter to them, now I know I need to shape I need to shape my social strategy around that. If I'm going to be sending out emails, those need to be the key value propositions that I'm talking about. That those are the words that I'm using in my subject lines. Those are the words I'm using in my captions. That it becomes the roadmap for every other touch point and story that you build out from there.
And I mean, that's amazing advice. First of all, use what you have, especially when others don't have it, those that could potentially grow to be significant sizes. But for those that are purely on Amazon, because I know Elevate Brands primarily works with Amazon brands. Is that right?
Yes. So yeah, that's how we're acquiring brands. And that said, a big piece of our strategy is building off Amazon marketing roadmaps for those brands. As I said, I think just optimizing your brand, it will get on Amazon. It will get you far. I don't think it's going to get you as far as you'll need to be a year from now. But that said, I think I can guess what your question is. There are many touch points, even within Amazon, where you need to think about that messaging. If you're doing sponsored video, what are the first 3 seconds in that video? Are you pulling out those key value props that kept surfacing in the reviews? Like that should be the main talking point at the very top of your video. If you're doing sponsored brand banners across search result pages, what's the copy that you're using for your headline? So it's all those little touch points, making sure that they're immediately speaking to the most central important piece of your consumer's worldview, right? Same with your store landing pages. If you have a product that or a line of products that serve 5 different main services, making sure that your landing pages are those words, acne solutions, whatever they are, like clarity of information, simplicity, and getting the right information at the top of the page in the first 3 seconds of your video, in the 5-word headline, because a first impression, it doesn't go away, right? So especially within Amazon, where there's so much clutter, that first impression needs to be just right.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah, and I mean that off Amazon strategy that you mentioned, I know it's been a very prevalent conversation that I've had, at least with a lot of our customers at Noviland, that they've considered. First of all, 2020 was a hard year for them to send in inventory to FBA. I think that was across the board. That was pretty much every brand was feeling it. But that was also the first time that I started seeing some of the larger players, at least that we work with, start to even consider other platforms, start to consider even having their own Shopify page, which I found I thought they would. I thought that was just another element of their supply chain that they would have had built out because of their size, but they definitely didn't. Or they might want to go on Home Depot or Lowe's or Wayfair or any of these other amazing marketplaces. But since Elevate Brands buys up these companies that started on Amazon, what if they are planning on going to these other marketplaces? Or what if they're on these other marketplaces and they don't necessarily have the best branding or marketing strategies? Is that something that would hurt their chances with you? In regards to their buyout?
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. I think it's a balance of just the genuine growth trajectory, understanding the genuine growth trajectory of that brand and the business owner's kind of vision, right? And finding them at the right moment. So, the ideal is really that they're in the middle of that kind of exponential growth curve. Like, we don't actually want to acquire it necessarily when it's, when they've optimized all the levers. The ideal is that they've done a fantastic job setting up the foundation. They've done a good handful of the best practices. And typically what happens is a seller might kind of hit an inflection point where they're realizing, I know I need X, Y, and Z resources, and I don't have them easily available to me. And to make the leap to get those resources is a huge leap for a small business owner. And so that's kind of the moment where it makes a lot of sense to partner with us, where we can provide all of those extra resources and expertise that can really pull all of the additional levers that were on their roadmap that they just hadn't had the opportunity to get to yet, if that makes sense. So that might include a Shopify store, or even just optimizing their owned and operated website, right? Several of our stores come in with websites, but they're not really set up for optimized conversion or for lead generation. So optimizing the website if it already exists, building one if it doesn't, starting to nurture consumers and community off of Amazon so that we capture them, that we're capturing them in our funnel and telling them stories so that when they're ready to purchase, they're there. So, some of those are pieces that we love building out post-acquisition. I think the important pieces when we're considering a brand is, what category they might be in, whether they're a category leader, the quality of the reviews and their rating. What really is important is the basics, and the quality of the product itself. Like, we don't want to sell fish oil at the end of the day. So we need to really believe in the products and the brands that we buy. And then, if they've done a good job setting up the foundation, pulling all those extra levers is an exercise of time, resources, and the right people in the right seats.
Which could be a lot for an Amazon owner, especially one that's growing, that's in that exponential phase. What about email lists? That's something that we talked to Troy Johnston about a while back at Seller.tools. And I know he was mentioning that is one of the most critical pieces for brands to continue engaging. Otherwise, it's a one-off sale. It could be a one-off sale on Amazon, unless it's, a very consistent product that people are buying and you have a great brand strategy behind it. How does that factor in to the funnel? As in, what are you looking for brands to be doing with their email lists?
Do you mean once we bring them in-house?
Yeah, well, and I'm not trying to poke at any internal strategies, but I guess, is there anything that they could be doing to set them up for success, or I guess to be better noticed by Elevate brands?
I mean, an email list is worth its weight in gold. We all know this. So when we have a brand come in that has an email list, I mean, it's fantastic. But it's not a make or break either. It's so funny, right? Because you would, in a world without Amazon, these are like fundamental pieces of brand and business success. Like when you look at a D2C brand, like core KPIs are email list growth, social growth. Like those are core KPIs that will tell you whether this is working or not, right? In Amazon, if you don't have an email list, that it just might not matter yet, right? And so, yes, of course, a brand coming in with a 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 person email list is fantastic. And oh my gosh, what an opportunity. Now we get to think strategically about how to engage that audience. But again, it's not a deal breaker if they don't have one, because we know how to build one. Again, it's an exercise of time and resources, and doing it at the right time when the kind of landing pages that we need to get those list subscribers to are optimized. But yeah, I think, we've taken on brands at all different stages of their life cycle, and it's just about understanding what stage they're at and supporting the brand from that point out. If they haven't yet moved beyond Amazon and it's just been a huge success on Amazon, fine, great. We know how to take them from that point on. So I think it's just a matter of, each brand that comes in as a marketing and strategic team auditing where we see them going quarter over quarter. Really, our process is optimizing every touch point on Amazon first before, aggressively moving strategy off Amazon, so that audience building that we do when we are on other channels is, getting the highest conversion it can get when we're driving it back to Amazon. So really making sure that the foundations are in place first, and then starting to explore, okay, what is the off Amazon strategy for this brand versus this one versus this one? And they are very different. We're not just kind of blanket hitting all the channels like a standalone D2C site might do. Because we think that it's, for us right now at this stage in our business, it's more effective to kind of focus in on, okay, this brand feels perfectly aligned with TikTok. So we're really going to dedicate our strategy to that platform and experiment there. And the learnings that we pull from that, we might apply it to these 3 brands, a month from now. So really trying to like isolate experiments, learn from them, and then apply them to the broader portfolio as we grow.
That's awesome. And I have a potentially dumb question that I'm not afraid to ask. So if you're selling exclusively on Amazon, because Amazon kind of maintains so much of the communication between the seller and the consumer, is the seller even privy to the emails of the people who are purchasing? Because I'd think that I would be then receiving emails from every single third-party seller that I've ever bought from on Amazon, and that's not the case. Do they even get that information?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very limited relationship that you are able to have with the Amazon customer. That said, it's clearly changing. It's changing in baby steps, but it is changing back to a more seller to customer relationship. Amazon, on an Amazon store, you can follow a brand, and Amazon is now opening up email comms with anyone that's following your brand. So, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I think the Amazon product team is understanding the value of marketing and kind of brand alignment, and how that will nurture more sales on the platform than if brands are feeling like they have to go elsewhere to nurture their relationship with their customers. And so, whereas just a few months ago, it was very difficult to have a relationship with your customer, that's clearly changing. And so I'm really curious to see how much more Amazon is going to open up the dialogue between, brands and their customers within the marketplace. I think they'll have to, otherwise more and more brands are going to spend more and more resources going elsewhere, because the lifetime value of your customer is extremely important. And if you can't remarket to them on Amazon, you're going to have to figure out how to do that elsewhere.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they're going to get backed into a corner with it, right? Because isn't it already more than half of the listings on Amazon are by third-party sellers? So they're essentially like in my mind, that's like the sellers own majority stock of Amazon. So they need to start doing what the sellers need at that point in time.
Yeah.
But no, that definitely makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a careful balance, right? Amazon's whole premise is customer first. And so if you open it up too much, then, there's this whole kind of spam, junk mail sort of scenario that could happen. So it is a very careful balance of like, how do you preserve the kind of clarity of the Amazon marketplace for the consumer, while still allowing brands to create relationships with their consumers. So we'll see. I mean, they just rolled out this week, the kind of referral bonus that brands can get if they're driving off Amazon traffic inbound. And now they're opening up email comms to store followers. So it definitely seems like it's trending in a good direction of, more direct communication with customers.
What is?
And oh, go ahead.
So I'm just thinking. So, like, what is the? I guess how do I ask this question? What's the ratio of what's the ratio of consumers that will buy from a brand on Amazon to those that actually follow the store on Amazon? So I'm thinking back, like there's some things that I buy that I repeat buy off Amazon from this one brand, and I'll continue to order it, but I don't necessarily follow their store. I've never actually visited their Amazon store. So what's the percentage of consumers that are actually paying attention to that information?
Well, today it's pretty low, but I think that's going to start changing, especially as brands are able to email that list and offer them, unique discounts or exclusive product launch opportunities. That creates impetus for a subscriber, right? So we ran a Prime Day display campaign for several of our brands, driving off Amazon traffic to landing pages, and we saw a significant bump in followers and store followers from that display campaign. And we weren't pushing them to follow us per se. We were just driving them to the store's landing page, and that follow button is prominent enough. And so we saw a pretty good bump in followers across several of our brands just from a couple days of driving very specific off Amazon traffic to those landing pages. So if that's just, from a couple days of inbound traffic and efforts, I think I think it'll start picking up more quickly.
Yeah, that's I've got some stores to go follow then, if we're going to start getting perks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an exciting time. It's kind of like, and same with Amazon posts, it's the beginning of something. It's a bit nebulous right now, but that's when you need to get in. That's when you need to experiment. That's when you need to play around with things. So as a consumer and as a brand. So I think it's going to be an interesting, an interesting experiment for the next few months, couple years, seeing how their kind of social angle starts to play out.
This will maybe be a ground floor something that I get in on SWA this time. We had a conversation about crypto the other day, and I was like, I didn't trust it, I didn't want it, but this I'll do.
I was talking to my dad about that because he's a retired computer science professor, and he's like, why didn't I listen to my students who told me to buy Bitcoin? Oh, and we were all like, yeah, Dad, like why? So yeah, I mean, a little bit different. If Amazon follows, not quite the same, but yes, I think this is a fun time to be playing around in the space for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually had a question in regards to offline, because we've been talking a lot about offline traffic, but does Amazon give you any sort of analytics from that offline traffic? Or I guess the offline traffic itself might give you some level of analytics into the clicks onto that. Like, let's say you have a learn more and it goes to your Amazon store, you may see the clicks for those. But does Amazon give you any inbound analytics, like Google Analytics, for example, would?
Yeah, I mean, I wish it were as robust as Google Analytics. It is not, but there is attribution data that you can set up attribution links within your Amazon dashboard. And as long as you're using dedicated links for each campaign or each inbound source of traffic, you are able to track kind of baseline metrics within the Amazon dashboard. So very limited, but at least gives you a good sense of what's working and what's not.
Got it. And that sort of leads me to my next question in regards to, because I know I did some digging into your background. I know you worked with startups in the past also. And one of I think the trickiest part with startups, particularly for the owners of those startups, is tracking documentation and tracking history of what you've experimented with and what was successful, what was a failure. I think some might do it too late. But is that something that you're looking for when you are working with those brands? Are you looking for all that proper documentation, or are those just conversations that you tend to have with them about what has worked, what hasn't worked?
Yeah, it's definitely much more conversational. We as a company are obsessed with documentation, which I think is good, especially at the rate that we're growing and, how many new team members we're bringing in. So for us, any opportunity we have to systemize something or create, a a postmortem or even a SOP, like where we're very proactive with that. And we have dedicated team members that kind of rally different departments to make sure that they're doing it. But as it pertains to sellers and their businesses, it is a much more entrepreneurial approach for them that has gotten them this far. And so it's really in those conversations and like, the kind of gut decisions that they made and how much of that they can share with us and how much we are able to get from them as we're onboarding and doing our due diligence for a new brand. But it's less frequent that it's very systemized at that stage.
Got it. Yeah, because I know that's an important core of any brand foundation. I would say any business's foundation, really, but a brand foundation itself is knowing, what you have experimented with. If you've tried TikTok, and what did you try? Like, what sort of ad strategy or messaging did you try? Maybe it was the wrong alignment, or you were targeting the wrong people. So yeah, that's sort of where I was leading to there. But what would you say are some of those core foundational creative marketing strategies, or just, I guess, a core foundation for marketing for any brand to think about as they're, and I'm always thinking about, those that are, they started something great. It's a great cash flow. They really want to get into a brand, because I think even a lot of businesses that are not the US, that are based outside of the US, we're not focused on brands to begin with, but they may start to be. And so that's sort of the mindset I'm coming from. So what are those important foundations to their brand that they should think about?
I mean, again, there are several, so it kind of depends on what stage that brand is at. Creative positioning, of course, is a really important one. Is your packaging the one that jumps out on the shelf, whether it's digital or brick and mortar? Are your ads converting? Like, so really getting your creative toolkit right and being commercial about your creative toolkit. And again, going back to that idea of data-driven design, understanding what the data means against your creative. Is it, testing colors? Is it testing typography? Really getting that right is going to save you so much money and give you so much clarity in all of the creative assets that you're going to have to build, month over month, year over year. So I would say really understanding your creative toolkit and how that's working against business goals is a fundamental piece of just a good foundation for your brand. And that's something that you need to have a true expert to come in and work with you to do. It's not something that you can find a junior designer to do. I mean, there are amazing designers out there, but this is someone who really understands the marriage of insights and creative and how to create converting visuals and graphics. So I would say that's one of the big ones. And it's often overlooked because, when you think of creative, you almost think that business is the last word that you would put next to that. But they're such perfect sides of, opposite sides of a coin. And then beyond that, and this is, really a reflection of this day and age, is understanding, again, who your ambassadors are. Who are the people out there that are going to do the word of mouth marketing for you? If you already have kind of a very small set of super fans following your little mini Instagram account, if that's where you're at, great. Like, engage with them, ask them to work with you, set up a Zoom call with them, tell them that you've seen them and that you've noticed them all this time. And you're about to roll out a new X, Y, or Z and you want their feedback. Like, really engage with the community that's already there if you have that luxury. And if you don't, start finding the community that you think is the one that's the group of people that are going to engage with your brand, and see whether they'll be your guinea pigs. I think, we all know that UGC and word of mouth marketing and, getting the recommendation from another consumer goes so much further than anything we can do with, an ad campaign. So the sooner you can really get in with your group, the better. And make it authentic. This is not a sales call. This is, well, in a way it is, but like really have them understand why you're asking for help and show them that this is a two-way street. And, if it's a paid partnership or if, whatever it is, make it work and continue to nurture that group of core ambassadors or content creators. I think they're going to be the most powerful tool for you, especially if you get in on that early. Building that group of real super fans is a powerful piece of it.
I think that's a really good piece of advice, because I think people kind of like compartmentalize using like the network that they have as like, I don't know. I feel like not enough people do that, because all the times if you have like one post about working out on your Instagram, over the course of a year, you'll have 10 different brands saying, oh, do you want to rep this, activewear line? It's like, I've never heard of you. No, I don't. But then if it's like a line that you've been following and that you're, always creating UGC or user generated content and, doing all those things, it almost seems more, it's like community marketing, or like having your community reach out for you. It's like, it almost becomes that social commerce, right? If you then call in the folks who already love it, it's just like, hey, let's just further relate this relationship.
It's 100% that. It's 100% that. And if that is an authentic relationship for which they see value in that relationship, meaning either they're getting free swag or they're getting paid for whatever it is, the amount of content you'll get from them, insight you'll get from them, again, it's just invaluable. You would pay so much for that to get it through consumer surveys or an agency creating, UGC style content. Why? When you can just go straight to the people who actually want to do it with you. So I think that is, especially for a small business, it's about relationship building. It's not about a huge budget. It's about authenticity and relationship building and knowing where your people are.
100%.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing. UGC is definitely, I think it's more fun to see UGC posts than it is to ever get targeted with an ad. I feel attacked sometimes when I see ads.
And it creates a whole different level of trust in the brand, right? It's like, this is clearly a real person. I could go, because it's so easy to tell fake Instagram accounts. I can go to this person's account. I can see they're a real person. And it's like, if they actually believe in this, that's one of like, I think this was the most brilliant thing. I don't know who came up with it, but on certain sites like Shein or Cupshe or Beach CC, I think, I don't know, just these online retailers for women's clothing, because women's clothing is never, the sizing is arbitrary. Nothing is ever the same. And when you actually have these women say, here are my measurements, here's what I ordered, here's how it feels, and here's a picture of it, that is the best thing anybody has ever come up with to, because that's UGC on your site. You don't have to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
Hats off to whoever came up with that, because that has been a lifesaver.
I think Free People does a good job of that too. I think in the carousel at the bottom of a product detail page is UGC content, and they say the specific sizes. And I mean, it is indeed brilliant, and it's pretty easy. I know for a fact Curate allows you to embed those specific product carousels at the bottom of your product detail page. So there are plenty of tools out there that can kind of help tie the pieces together, so if you're really engaging with your social community and creating good relationships with them and giving them the tools that they need to create content, then you can hook that up using a tool like Curate straight to your product detail page. And there you go. It's shoppable UGC right on your site. So yeah, the tools are there. The people are there. It's just about like doing the legwork to reach out and understanding the value of those people.
For sure. And yeah, Sorry, my mind's going a million miles a minute. Francois, go ahead before I go down a rabbit hole.
Well, no, I was just going to ask, is that something that you need to, let's say you start to build that audience, you start to build a community, and as any business owner, I think most of them will be authentic and genuine when they first reach out. But is that something that they need to necessarily build a strategy for? Like, I'm only going to reach out so they can try to give me pictures of themselves within my clothes? Or is that something that they can just reach out, I don't know, to see how things are going? I'm guessing, do you have to build a strategy before reaching out?
Well, I think it's good to build a strategy before spending any. Yeah, I think anything that yes, you need a strategy because it is a strategic move, right? So what is our objective with reaching out to these people? How many of them are we hoping to reach out to? What are the different tiers that would make sense for some of these people? Some of them, maybe we don't want to create content for us, but we want them as, part of our feedback loop when we're prototyping new product or whatever it may be. Maybe one of those super fans ends up being your community manager and is actually a hire, right? So it's kind of like, okay, if I'm looking at my community, at the tribe that I want to build my brand for, what am I hoping to achieve in my relationships with them beyond obviously customers? So is it ambassadors that are answering questions on a Facebook group? Maybe it's a gardening brand. And so you need like super fans that are great gardeners that can answer some of the questions that the Facebook group has. So maybe you'll find those people. And so maybe that's one of your strategic goals of the outreach. Another strategic goal is content creators, and that a certain set of those people in the community you're really looking to create content for you. Another group of them, or maybe all of them, is your survey group that you're using to ask questions around existing products or new product development. So indeed, you should really figure out like, what are all the different ways that I might want to lean in on this community to help grow my business to better serve them. And then figure out, how many do I need in each bucket, and what are the prerequisites for fitting into one bucket versus the other, and what does the outreach look like when I'm reaching out to someone that I think is right for this bucket versus this one, and then go and execute.
Yeah, I mean it's a great methodology. It's a great to think about a post-sale engagement strategy, and I guess you can always loop that back into your pre-sale. Like you were saying, if you have those Facebook groups that need professional growers to answer those questions, that's essentially bringing them into that pre-sale loop, and I guess cycling the entire ecosystem. Now, because I know I've heard the conversation be touched on in the past, and not necessarily by you, but by someone else that was talking branding strategy. I forgot exactly who it was, but it was geared towards brands that may have several buyer personas, or let's say they have, one very unique product and they could show it in 10 different ways on Amazon. Now for those brands or those products, I would say, what would you recommend that they do in regards to, picking a buyer persona? Who I was listening to said, try everything all the time, which I think seems impossible. I don't know. I guess if you have the resources, that would be great. But I guess with your history and your background, what would you recommend that they might, what path would they take there?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have one brand that kind of fits that model. And I mean, the most simple solution when I was kind of thinking through how to solve that exact problem is like, you have to create different landing page experiences for those different customers. They're too different. You can't bucket them together. It will be confusing. And again, like on Amazon, you do need to be very straightforward. You need to say like, this is you, this is us, look how great we align. It really needs to be that clear. And so if you have 3 very distinct use cases for one product, well, great. You have a very easy way to build out 3 distinct landing pages on your Amazon store, and drive those different persona types to those landing pages. So building, for example, campaigns around the keywords that are unique to each persona type that drives them to that landing page with, very clear, purchase block towards the top of that landing page. So it feels very aligned with a typical Amazon PDP, but it's speaking the specific story to that persona. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work. I mean, just keeping up with it. That's why I guess Elevate Brands would be able to help those businesses reach those different audiences and have the operational resources. Really, it's just resources, right? Having people to be able to target them, create all the keywords, track them, manage different social media strategies. I feel like it's hard.
I think there's always a way to be scrappy. And there's always a place where you can start. So if you're looking at something and thinking about like the idea, like, well, I should do it this way. Okay, that's fine. If you have the resources that you have today, how can you do it best? Like there will always be a simple way to execute against the same goals, if that makes sense. It might not be the perfect hi-fi way that you want to do it 5 years from now, but you can always execute against your goals. And especially when we're talking about like personas and aligning with the right people, that's actually pretty simple. That's really just like, you have to understand your customer. If you have 3 different types of customers that are buying the same product and you are not willing to build the clear messaging for those 3, then you shouldn't be the entrepreneur that's driving that brand, right? Like that's like your first piece of homework. So I think, you can use the same set of photos. You just change the messaging, you change the sticker on top of it. Instead of saying, great for hip pain, it says whatever your other persona is. There are easy ways to swap it out. You create a toolkit, a visual toolkit that you can rinse and repeat, and you change your messaging, and that can be your V1, So I think there are ways to keep it super simple, work with what you have, but their personas' journeys, I don't think that's the complicated part from a lift standpoint. That's the piece that you have to do at the very beginning anyways, like whether you're a huge company or whether you're an entrepreneur with 1 employee, you have to do that homework. That's fundamental. And so, yeah, I think it can be super complicated, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, with enough grit, I think a lot of Amazon sellers, the vast majority of who I've talked to have a ton of grit. They come at this.
We're talking about Amazon entrepreneurs here. Like they have nothing but grit. So
yeah. With enough grit, I think enough could be tackled. I think what you mentioned earlier about sometimes bringing in experts, let's say around content strategy, maybe. It's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. Like, I don't know much about TikTok advertising. I love watching the videos, but I am not the person to ask. I would rely on Lisa or someone else on the team to inform me about what's going on there. Is that something where you, and I guess it's always going to vary, depending on what sort of resources and capital you have. But is that something that you would consider hiring in-house versus outsourcing to something like an agency?
You mean us, Elevate Brands?
Not Elevate Brands, but like the entrepreneur as they grow.
I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I think that a creative strategist or a creative director is one of the most valuable employees of a small business. They need to be the right mix of, when I think of a creative director, it's not purely a design lead. It's someone who is creatively directing your brand, creatively positioning it in the right way to meet your audience, to convert. They're extremely business minded. And yeah, if you are able to afford that hire, there will never not be work for that person, even in the smallest company. I've worked with very small brands, and meaning just, fledgling startups. And there is never a lack of work to do when it comes to creative and strategy and positioning. Like, there's just never a lack of work and thinking to be done for a brand, especially when you're trying to grow that brand, when you're a baby. So if you have the resources, bringing in that creative lead, especially because typically, the entrepreneur, that is not at all their background. Bringing in that person, I think where it gets tricky is knowing who to hire, right? Like, if that's not your background, then how do you know who to hire? How do you know that you're hiring the right person that has the right mix of skills and the right history and background to be that pivotal hire for your company? I think that's where it gets tricky for perhaps an Amazon entrepreneur. So maybe the solve is, finding a recruiter to help you make that hire, so that they do the vetting for you and make sure that if you are taking that leap and bringing on a creative lead to help drive these goals, that it's really the right person. Because, I think that's the trickiest piece. And I've seen this happen too. A small company will bring in a creative lead, but they're just not the right fit, or they don't have the experience to carry that much of the business that early on, so it's tricky. I mean, there's pros and cons in both. With agencies, you don't have as much clarity into the process, and it can be significantly more expensive than just hiring an individual. So yeah, I think there are pros and cons to both. And for a business owner that might not have the background in those disciplines, it must be extremely daunting. So I don't have a clean answer there. I wish I could be more of a resource to someone looking for that head. I think those strategists and those creatives are so impactful for a business, and especially early on in their growth. It's a tricky one.
And that's okay. We love it depends and I'm not sure answers, because then you end up sharing great information just like that. So there's definitely resources out there for people to find those folks. They've just got to, somebody out there do the footwork and then come on the podcast and tell us.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a recruiting company that this is exactly their niche, finding that first creative hire for fledgling startups. Kudos to that recruiting firm. I love them already.
Well, and there's so many for standard startups, right? I mean, you hear about recruiters specifically for startups all the time, but I think for a long time, this industry hasn't been looked at as startup online retailers. They've been looked at as Amazon businesses, until we start to see more private equity and venture capital come into the industry, and aggregators such as Elevate Brands start to really blow these brands up. I think that's where we're going to start to hear even the term startup, because that's what they are. That truly is what they are. And finding, what those functional roles actually are, and how they mesh together, how that structural hierarchy starts to be put together. So I'm very excited to see how everything, especially with Elevate Brands, comes, and $250 million on a Series B. That is flipping phenomenal. Awesome. I mean, that just means you can acquire so many more brands, bring them together, really, really help them skyrocket off of just Amazon. So I'm super excited to see what comes of it, Lo.
100%.
Yes. It's such an exciting time for the company, and I think we're all really charged and looking forward to the months ahead. And we have, as I mentioned, an amazing team in place. Really did some great work hiring just absolute rock stars that come from all different backgrounds. But we have a lot more seats to fill, a lot of open roles, and it's a very exciting space. So I think anyone who is at all interested in the space, and definitely check out our website and go look at some of our open roles that we have, because we are looking for incredible people to join the team always.
Awesome. And we've got that site up on the screen. It's elevatebrands.com, and it'll be listed underneath the video and the audio experience as well. And Lo, where can folks get in touch with you if they have questions specifically about any of the information that you shared today?
I am on LinkedIn. I think it's just Lo Martin, and I'm on Instagram. I don't have a lot of time to I must say, for someone who is a marketer and content strategist, I really don't get to do too much of it for myself. But yes, for sure, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat, and or you can just email me, lo@elevatebrands.com.
Awesome. Well, Lo, thank you so much for joining us, dear. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And remember, everybody, this is just part 2 of our 4-part series with Elevate Brands. We are still going to talk to Jeremy Bell and to Muzzy. I'm really excited to talk to those gentlemen, just as we were to speak with Lo today. So if you guys liked what you heard, be sure to give us a like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications on the YouTube channel. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, go on ahead and write a review and turn on those automatic downloads. It helps everybody else find these awesome conversations with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Lo Martin. Lo, thank you so much, dear, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.